Hello, I'm Howard. I've worked in UK railway engineering for nearly 20 years in everything from maintenance and fault response to project work, renewals, and management. I don't claim to know everything, but I can hopefully share some knowledge. And this, I want this to be the first in a series of videos about railways and railway engineering um, in video games. I like games, I play games. And I know none of these games are going to be train simulator games or anything, but I wanted to have a look and just see how much effort was put in and the general level of feasibility and accuracy. See if it's actually anything that could have really operated or could be close to really operating. So I wanted to start with Fallout 4. That's a game that I'm back on at the moment after some time off. I used to play that a lot, and then I went through a few other games, and then the series came out and it became popular again. So I've been drawn back into that. So let's have a look. Hello, and welcome to the settlement of Starlight Driving, where it's bloody raining. Give me a minute. Bloody weather. And welcome back to Starlight Driving. I thought I'd start here because I know there's some infrastructure and some engines and carriages and stuff around here. So there we are on the bridge. But the locomotives in Fallout 4, I believe they're all steam powered, actually. Probably nuclear steam powered. So they've probably got some kind of nuclear um, reactor on there that powers the steam generator, much as it does in a nuclear power station. The first thing about these is they're really a bit tall. So if you look at the height of it versus the width of the gauge, the width of the rails, it's very unstable, I'd say. Going around a curve like that, it's not going to be ideal. Oh, hang on. Whee! Oh, there's another one. And another, and oh, this is like something from Alfred Hitchcock. I better get out of here. Anyway, yeah. So it reminds me of the sort of 20s style streamliner trains with its design, and you can see the connection rods there on the drive wheels to drive them round, much like a traditional steam engine. Various inlets and pipes. It's a very feasible sort of design, if a bit tall for the width of the rail. So you look at its top heavy there, with the width of it at the bottom versus the top. And then you can see there's a derailment happened here with some sort of agricultural equipment and big stone concrete blocks, obviously going to some sort of quarry or farm that would require concrete blocks and agricultural equipment, which shows that the railway has a purpose. Sleepers, there's some missing. That's excusable in that some of the locals in the Commonwealth have probably pinched those to use on the farm and in various bits of construction around settlements. Now, the base plates there have, I see two rail spikes in them, which look to be retaining the rail in its position. That's fairly common, fairly typical. That's a real sort of design. Lots of railhead corrosion. That corrosion's pretty accurate. That's how it usually looks in real life. The track was ballasted, although moss and everything's grown up through the ballast, but it has been ballasted. Yeah, the fastenings, the base plates, the sleepers, the rail. I notice it's flat bottom rail rather than bull head or any of the ones where it's like a head on either side and in chairs. This is flat on the bottom, which was, I think, that was introduced in the late sort of 50s, more than anything else. So a bit of a later design, which is interesting. It's about the right time frame for flat bottom rail. Yeah, very good. So some more carriages here. And then the bridge. Let's have a look at the bridge. So, very typical sort of steel construction. Steel transverse beams, they probably go underneath as part of an I-beam. I noticed the rails only retained by one base plate every about 20 feet. You'd have a bit more than that because the rail in between those two base plates is likely to splay out as the train passes with the outward pressure. So could do with a few more base plates because it's not really held in by anything there unless again it's been pinched by some of the locals. Let's have a look underneath. Nope, can't get that way. Yeah, this is what I sort of expect to see from a railway bridge. The buttresses and abutments and columns. Up there we have the fixing points. Yeah, that's a very feasible and sort of sensible construction. It doesn't look out of place. They've put a bit of thought into that. Yeah, don't see anything wrong with that. That's a very feasible bridge design. Pretty good. Let's wander up back here. Bit of an obstruction on the line there. Railway's taking the sort of path I'd expect. Not too bad of a radius. There's a turnout, a bit of switches and crossings, a bit of S&C. So it's turning out. So you've got a main line, and that goes off down there is obviously a loop so that it can park up and maybe get loaded up. Whereas the line on the right would probably be the main straight on line, and you'd put them in the loop for the other trains to pass. No, there's the switch toe, the toe of the switch where the train enters the switch, and there's no stretcher bars I notice, which without the stretcher bars, the switch rails would just flop around and the train would hit the end of them. But there's no point operating equipment either. No levers, springs, pneumatics, hydraulics, electrical motors, nothing to move that switch. So I don't see how it works. Maybe there's something around the other side. No, but it's feasible that the locals would have taken those parts for that the lever and spring assembly could now well be opening the chute of a grain hatch in a settlement somewhere. All the useful moving components. Yeah, there's a crossing nose. Nice bit of corrosion on there. Very realistic. That's a typical sort of crossing nose. That's exactly what you'd see in the real world. Quite well designed. And now we're in the loop, the turnout. Again, the base plates and rails, flat bottom, just the same as the rest of it. What I'm noticing here is no joints. There's no joints in the rail. So every 60 feet ish, there'd be a joint in the rail, and you get that characteristic clatter of the train going over it. That appears to be a joint in the entire world rather than rather than the rail. But here we've got a signal box. This is a fairly typical design. This could quite easily be in the real world. They usually have the signalman upstairs or the signaller with the levers and switches and the panel, and downstairs would be the interlocking equipment, lever frames, either mechanical or electrical interlocking that would operate the points, switches, and signals. I haven't seen any signals so far, which I've got a theory on that, but I'll look at that in a minute. So there's no gear up here to actually operate anything or sign that there was any holes in the floor or switches or old wiring or anything. So what it could be is, given the boxes or the signal boxes are a mile or so apart or 2 miles in game, roughly, what could be happening is the in the old days, before mechanical and electrical signalling, they had policemen that policemen used to signal the trains by using flags and lamps to be stop, go, proceed, or even. So it could be that it was signaled manually, which you would have if, perhaps, if like in Fallout, I believe it's freight only, the above ground trains. So the Metrolink and the diesel looking stuff down there and the stuff underground would be um, passenger services. But I believe I read somewhere that overground trains in Fallout were freight only, which I think I've only seen freight above ground. We'll see if there's any passenger stuff, at least in the Commonwealth in Fallout 4. But I believe it's freight only above ground. Um, we'll see. But that's a typical design of a signal box, whether it be used mechanically and electrically or hand signaled. There's a lot of signal boxes that look like that. So here we are on the main line. And oh dear, there's a passenger. Now, Michael. There we are. So let's have a look. This looks very much like freight. Barrels, boxes, things falling over. We get the idea. Very freight-like. Let's have a look at this axle. Bit of suspension there. No wooden bottom, steel structure. That's fairly typical. An accurate layout. So you've got a main line, a loop, and a third line to the left there, which looks like a siding that goes into a yard to be loaded up with concrete. So that's the loop, that's the main line, and then here is another turnout into a siding for that concrete yard. Again, a crossing nose there, and here's the siding into the concrete yard where presumably they load these big concrete blocks onto the trains. Again, this has purpose. Someone's designed this knowing that this is a concrete yard, which is pretty good. That forklift there, heavy duty industrial strength forklift, probably puts those concrete blocks on the back and ships them off where they need to go. So there's some kind of concrete refinery nearby. Hello. And this is going back into the main line where there's a derailed concrete wagon. See, there's no stretcher bars. In reality, though, the switch rails that send the train from line to line would need a bar between them, a transverse bar, to hold the gauge, or the rails would just flop around everywhere. The train would hit the end of them. But it's easy to imagine that the stretcher bars have been unbolted and taken for some kind of use for the settlements nearby. Again, no stretcher bars, no point operating equipment, no levers, nothing to move those switches. So they've either been taken or just they've not really been bothered to put it into the game because it's a bit too much detail, which is perfectly acceptable too. Here we have level crossing. So there's a bit of slab in the middle to allow cars to drive over without obviously falling into the tracks. Some footboards, obviously for cars and pedestrians to walk over. They've got those dots on that would suggest that pedestrians would use it to alert people hard of sight that there's a crossing there. Railway signs, no sort of barriers as such that would come down and, that you usually have red and white barriers, nothing like that. Another derailment. They run these trains really right behind each other because there was only a train back there. And here, this is I'm using the gradient at which this track is on. Look at this. It's like a downhill roller coaster. You would never, ever get a train to go down a gradient such as that. But if you see the rock faces jutted out there and all the land and the mud, this is probably the result of some sort of seismic or activity, or perhaps nuclear bomb, given that it's destroyed the motorway bridge as well there, the big overhead bridge. So there might have been a landslip over time, but it looks fairly stable there. That bridge hasn't slipped. But the gradient at which this is going down is just extreme. Um, you would never get a train to go down that, especially not something the size of those locomotives and wagons that we've seen. Maybe that's a nod that the developers have put in there, the derailed bogie at the bottom of this enormous sort of slope. You'd never get a train down that gradient in reality, or up it for that matter, even with a bit of sand. Again, base plates every 10, 20 yards or so. Not really representative of what you'd have, but that's being picky. Another derailment. They really were running these trains right up the back of each other. Again, this bridge, that's what I expect to see in terms of a foundation block, a big, nice concrete foundation, some abutments and columns, and the steel bearings at the top that bear the load down into the piles and the abutments. This one's a little off to one side rather than central. For load bearing purposes, I'd expect it more to be central. Might be an aesthetic choice on the part of the level designer, off over to one side instead of in the center, but that's just being picky. So let's head back out onto the line. No, get out of here, Brian, not now, I'm filming a video. So the rails, there's no joints, so in that case they must be welded. And here's another signal box, not far down the line from the last one, a couple of miles in game. Still no signals, like the red, yellow, green aspect signals that you see. So, for hello, madam, just visiting your signal box. So further proof that maybe it was manually signalled by us. No equipment either, no sign of any previous equipment. Could be signalled manually by the signalmen with their flags or lamps. See that gradient zone just down there? It's not far beyond that last signal box was. That's what you get in the old days. Again, another classic design of a signal box there. And here's a water tower. And this is obviously some sort of station, but this water tower would suggest that the assumption that there's steam engines is correct, because you need to refill your steam engines from the water tower because they need water to create the steam. So it'd pull up outside the signal box, which is only just up from Oberlin Station, only just up from the last one, fill up with water, and be on their way. Probably after that gradient, they'd need to. Let's have a look in this one, see if there's anything in there. Empty. Oh, way station. Let's have a look. Good evening, madam. Thank you. But no interlockings, mechanical, electrical, nothing to indicate any signalling capacity. Some sort of air vent there. Don't know what that's for. No. So overall, pretty good. It's missing some minor components, such as the stretcher bars that retain the switch rails, because otherwise they just go all over the place and the train hits the end of them when it's trying to move the train from track to track. It's missing any point operating equipment, any signals, but that's all excusable to a degree. So that all of that stuff could have been stolen, taken by settlements, because within the signals and the point operating equipment and some of the sleepers, that's going to be the stuff that's valuable. The moving parts, the electrical motors, things like that. That could be very valuable to the settlers of the Commonwealth. So I haven't got anything to compare this video against. So I want to give it a rating out of 10, but in its favor, there's a purpose to everything. I mean, the layout of the main lines with the loops going into the sidings, so you can park trains in the siding and pass other trains on the main line. And then there's off the loop, there's a siding that goes into a yard to load up concrete. To as a freight system, everything there is done with purpose, which the designers have really thought about. There, they've done a freight network that has purpose. They've potentially thought about things like signaling via flags and lamps with the signal boxes that aren't too far away from each other. They've thought of water towers to fuel the steam engines back up. Even though they're nuclear, they still have steam. And I think some of that has to do with the fact that um, the theory in Fallout is that they have discovered nuclear power and mastered nuclear power, but not microprocessors and microchips. So although they've got all the nuclear power in the world, they're still in the age of steam, basically, with the trains because they haven't mastered the microprocessor and microchips. I believe that's the Fallout law on the situation. So, all things considered, it's only missing a few minor components, but the idea of the system and as a rail network, it could well be functional. It has purpose. It has the right layout. It has the right components. Uh, 6.5 out of 10. That might change with future videos depending on what other games score. So, thanks for watching and good night, if it is indeed night.